Let's start with a couple of quick updates to previous shows. We talk a lot about migrants on this show. Here's an arresting statistic out of the Home Affairs Committee this week. 1 to 2% of the entire male population of Albania have moved here on small boats in the last year. So the good news is that if that keeps up, in 50 years there'll be no Albanian men in Albania, and it'll be safe for the rest of us to move there. Here's a topic that Polly mentioned, and which we cover every week, because not to cover it is to be complicit. The serial gang rape of thousands of English girls in towns up and down the land. A postscript to the hell of Rochdale, as Polly just reported on GBNews. Rochdale grooming gang members lose appeal against deportation from UK to Pakistan. Adil Khan, 51, and Abdul Rauf, 52, have lost their appeal. Immigration judges have ruled. So after 10 years of legalistic jousting, Mr. Khan and Mr. Rauf are headed home. Oh, I'm terribly sorry, by the way. When I read that headline about Messrs. Khan and Rauf being deported from the UK to Pakistan, I meant, of course, to say that they're being deported from the UK to Asia. Whether the People's Republic of Asia or the Sultanate of Asia or the Islamic Emirate of Asia is not yet known. But they'll be taken to whichever Heathrow terminal flights to Asia General Vicinity International Airport leave from. Yesterday, we interviewed a primary school teacher who lost her job because she did not wish to go along with the school's all-out affirmation of an 8-year-old girl who presents as a boy. She took her sacking to court, and in our last exchange, I wondered whether the judges, like the educational establishment, might already be all in on the trans mania. So it has proved. The High Court has rejected Hannah's application for judicial review on the grounds that child X is, quote, young and vulnerable. Indeed, that is one reason why no prudent society would sign on to the accelerated transitioning of its infants. But our society is bonkers. Give me a boy till 7, said the Jesuits, and I will show you the man. Give me a boy till 7, say today's teachers, and I will show you the girl. In the last few days, NHS England has clarified its position on this issue. Headline from the Daily Telegraph this week, most children who think they're transgender are just going through a phase, says NHS. Unfortunately, that's not how the schools, the courts, the Church of England, 1.5 of our 2 biggest political parties see it. In 20 years' time, we will have a lot of profoundly unhappy, mutilated, infertile young adults who will hate us for what the madness of the moment did to them. There was a very interesting discussion, actually, on Dubes earlier this evening, right here at GB News, with Michelle's 2 guests. And it was interesting to me that the left-wing fellow was obviously a bit queasy about it, kept saying he'd much rather go back to talking about the economy. But this is a big thing, bigger than the Westminster soap opera. Hard as it may be to believe, but the abolition of biological sex, which is what's going on here, is bigger than who this week's Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster is, and indeed even bigger than, I don't know, who was that guy there? Is that the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster? I have no interest in whoever that guy is. Don't ever put that picture of him up again. I don't know. The Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster is not important. The abolition of biological sex is. An Australian view of this show points out something that this story has in common with another big topic, so-called detransitioners. People who change their minds about transitioning. They're ignored and silenced and ridiculed in much the same way that victims of the COVID vaccines are. In both cases, they're groups of people who have been left permanently crippled by the rigorously enforced groupthink of our time. We've covered those bereaved and injured by the vaccines all year on this show, since it first emerged that these crappy state ordered medical products don't prevent you catching the disease and don't prevent you passing on the disease. Real people, your neighbours, your fellow citizens, have been ruined by the media groupthink of these last 2 years, but the narrative is shifting, not as fast as it should, but shifting nonetheless in very interesting ways. Here's Danny Kruger, MP for Devizes, speaking in the House of Commons and with a partial mea culpa for his own acquiescence to the groupthink.
And while many questions need to be answered about our COVID response, it's by no means the worst offender. We're not Canada or New Zealand or China, places where they think they can exterminate COVID by depriving the population of the most basic civil liberties. But we still do have, I'm afraid, questions to ask ourselves and even much to be ashamed of. I'm particularly ashamed, and I put it on record in hindsight, of my own vote to dismiss the care workers who didn't want to take the vaccine. And I very much hope that the 40,000 care workers who lost their jobs can be reinstated and indeed compensated.
One MP who says he is ashamed of his vote to wreck the lives of all those people who had the good sense not to take this, at best, worthless and at worst, potentially fatally harmful vaccine. This is important. With both the transmania and the vaccines, the state should not be colluding in the crippling of its citizens.